Establishing queenside influence and immediately challenging central control prepares for flexible pawn structures and potential flank attacks. Securing central influence and opening diagonals for bishop development, a classic response to the English opening. Developing the knight towards the center establishes a solid pawn structure and prepares for further piece activity. Developing the knight actively challenges white's central pawn on c4 and prepares for kingside castling. Developing another knight towards the center immediately contests black's central control. Developing the knight towards the center efficiently, this piece now eyes potential central pawn breaks and supports future piece activity. Opening the center aggressively, white immediately contests black's central foothold and aims for rapid piece development and piece activity. Extending the pawn creates immediate tension, aiming to disrupt white's central harmony and gain breathing room for black's pieces. Instantly dislodging the advanced black pawn, this knight repositions to support a future pawn push, aiming to reclaim central influence and prepare for queenside expansion. Activating the bishop to a strong outpost immediately challenges white's pawn structure and pressures the central knight. Solidifying the center, white prepares for a controlled pawn advance, aiming to restrict black's pieces and foster a more robust structure. Solidifying your king's safety is paramount. This prepares for potential central exchanges and keeps your pieces harmonized. Developing the bishop to a natural square, aiming to castle and solidify the king's safety. A tactical retreat, opening the central file for potential future action, and reinforcing the bishop's diagonal. Fortifying the kingside, this castling maneuver reorients white's rooks, preparing to join the central battle and secure the monarch from potential long-range threats. Sacrificing a bishop this way opens lines for your queen and rook, but weakens your king's defenses considerably. Opening the b-file grants queenside pressure and opens diagonals for future piece development. Solidifying central control with the pawn advance prepares to challenge white's central pawn structure. Unlocking the f-file creates vital attacking lines towards black's king. Instantly liberating the f-file for the rook, this captures a pawn and opens pathways for the queen. Reclaiming the bishop opens the b-file, enhancing piece activity for future attacks. Suddenly, the open f-file becomes a critical battleground, directly threatening the white king's safety. Reclaiming the open b-file with the knight offers a dynamic counter to black's advanced pawn and forces white to consider piece coordination. The rook returns to its post, a cautious defender surveying the now open central files. Unpinning the knight frees up a key defender and aims to disrupt black's harmonious development, potentially creating weaknesses. This knight repositions to eye the kingside weaknesses, aiming to bolster the defense and prepare for future counterplay on the central files. Sharpening the focus on the kingside, this aims to pressure black's vulnerable pawn structure while preparing for potential pawn advances. Establishing a solid pawn chain, black reinforces their central control and prepares for potential pawn advances later. Activating the rook on the semi-open file, this maneuver squarely challenges black's queen and aims to seize central control. A proactive bishop pivot, aiming to contest the central e-file and potentially harass white's king. Strikes at the structural integrity of black's pawn shield, forcing a reorganization of the cavalry. Opening the g-file for your rook, but it creates permanent pawn weaknesses around your king. Unlocking the kingside attack, h4 aims to create serious weaknesses around black's monarch and potentially open a deadly path. Liberating the d-pawn unlocks central pressure and opens diagonals, but potentially weakens the pawn chain. Opening the c-file creates immediate pressure, aiming to exploit black's weakened kingside structure. Reclaiming the pawn stabilizes the pawn structure and opens a diagonal for the bishop. Relocating the bishop to d1 aims to redeploy it, potentially to g4, while clearing the e-file for future piece activity. Seeking to unravel white's queenside pawn structure, this piece repositions aggressively, eyeing crucial central squares and potential tactical opportunities. Sacrificing the rook opens a dangerous diagonal towards black's king. Reclaiming material and centralizing the knight, this maneuver aims to activate the piece and contest the e-file. Shifting the queen to threaten the weak d-pawn solidifies white's queenside initiative and prepares a more active role for this key piece. Reclaiming the open file with the rook aims to disrupt white's centralized pieces, but it leaves the king exposed to diagonal threats. A double-edged decision, this exchanges pieces that could have controlled the d-file later. Reclaiming the pawn reopens the f-file for your rook, promising active counterplay along this vital open column. Initiating a pawn storm toward the exposed black king, this aggressive thrust opens vital lines for attack. Pulling the knight back to f8, black aims to redeploy it, perhaps to g6 or h7, to reinforce their weakened kingside and prepare for potential counterplay. A bold sacrifice to rip open the kingside, aiming to exploit the exposed black monarch. A courageous king venture, seeking shelter behind newly formed pawn shield. Opening a vital file for attack, this rook maneuver aggressively targets the weakened black king. Opening the king's file for attack, this bishop swap actually strengthens white's kingside pressure and control. The queen repositions to target the weak light squares around black's king, creating potent threats. Re-establishing a pawn shield after white's aggressive foray, the knight aims to bolster the king's safety amidst the open lines. Securing the bishop on c2 frees up the d-file for potential future advances. Shifting the queen to contest the b-file could be a pivotal moment, potentially disrupting white's rook activity and preparing for a more active defense. Unleashing the queen's full offensive potential, this move ignites the kingside attack and pins down the beleaguered black king. The queen's redeployment seeks to disrupt white's relentless pressure and potentially find a safer square. Unleashing a knight fork threat, this recapture forces a crucial pawn decision. Exposing the king by capturing the bishop cracks open the pawn shield, creating immediate attacking possibilities. Sacrificing the rook exposes black's weakened king to a devastating mating net. Consolidating the king's position becomes paramount as the enemy's queen surveys the weakened queenside. Exposing the opposing monarch to relentless pressure, this rook maneuver creates a mating net of undeniable power. Asserting control over the f5 square offers a temporary respite from the immediate tactical storm. Unleashing a mating net across the board, this check forces the black monarch into a suffocating pin.